Until recently, we in Britain differed from many of our European neighbours in that since the war we've had no major party of the extreme right. But as inflation and unemployment got worse during the 70s, a group which at first hadn't been taken seriously began to emerge as a real political force. In a series of elections here in London and elsewhere, the National Front got enough votes to push the Liberals into fourth place. But in the last year, all this has changed. The Front is now in disarray. Its vote has collapsed, and its leadership has been torn apart by internal feuding. Tonight, we're going to examine why this has happened.
The steel bands and rock groups made for a carnival, but the message was political, that the National Front were no different from the Nazis and should not be accorded the same rights as other political parties. Over half the crowd were teenagers, reflecting perhaps the extensive campaign groups like the Socialist Workers' Party has waged in the schools against the National Front. This Caribbean-style procession was by far the largest anti-fascist demonstration seen in London since the war. The march stretched for well over 5 miles and certainly surprised the organisers. Effigies of National Front leaders John Tyndall and Martin Webster, with one of Hitler in between, were carried through the streets of the East End of London.
Waiting for me when I die. But between that day you're born and when you die, you never seem to hear even your cry. So as sure as the sun will shine, I'm gonna get my share now. What's mine? And then the harder they go, harder they fall. What an art.
National Front achieved one of its best results in Hackney South and Shoreditch. It won nearly 3,000 votes, 4 times as many as the Liberal candidate, to give it a 19% share of the total. Many of the Front's votes came from former Labour voters.
This is the picture that the British electorate faces as they come towards this general election. Where is the difference between the Tory, Labour and Liberal Party? Only in matters of degree, only in matters of detail. All of them believe in a multiracial society. The only party with hundreds of candidates in this election which says stop immigration, start repatriation, put the British people first, is the National Front. I've been driving around Bethnal Green and Bow, my constituency, on the loudspeaker van last Sunday, and I've been telling people there straight, in order to make sure that they do understand what the difference between them and us, them being the Tory, Labour and Liberal Party, and the National Front. I tell them continually over the loudspeakers, I hope the race relations board is there, the man taking his notes. I promise them, this is my electoral claim, I promise them racial discrimination. I am standing on a platform of racial discrimination.
election. Somewhere so high above this wall, I see my light come shining from the west down to the east. Any day now, any day.
One area where the front concentrated their efforts was in the East End of London, where they had done well in the 74 elections. The borough of Tower Hamlets had always been a safe Labour area, but it had become badly run down with the closure of the London docks and the drift of industry away from the inner city. It also had a big immigrant population. During the 60s and early 70s, thousands of Asian families had set up homes and businesses here. This combination of immigration and unemployment made the National Front attractive to sections of the white working class.
David Bigotry was one of the main writers involved in Rock Against Racism for Temporary Hoardings. He wrote lots of articles. He was a doctor in the East End, and he wrote a book after Ra was all over called Beating Time. The last chapter of this book is prophetic.
Our country free from invasion when the invaders have got black, brown and yellow faces. Let them throw against us all the fury and all the hate of the old world. We'll carry on marching like a great army towards the Britain of our dreams.
1976-77 was urgent. A Nazi organisation were making big gains at the ballot box. And not only that, they were terror on the streets. And they were attempting to capitalise on Enoch Powell's racist outburst to really build a fascist organisation. The first time since the Second World War they had the chance. By 76 there was a massive cut in social welfare and things were bad. Unemployment was going through the roof. No future became the word really of the punk.
You began to really become conscious of the rise of the front because they were able to latch on to certain historical things. The Idi Amin's expelling of the Ugandan nations, the right-wing press playing the same old tune, we're going to be swamped, we're going to be mobbed, you know, they're bringing in tuberculosis. All that old stuff they were able to then use that as part of their race hate propaganda.
Just round the corner from here, there was one of the very vocal and craziest of members of the National Front, a man called Derek Day, and he painted the whole of his block with a Union Jack, and he used to shout racist abuse and obscenities at everybody who went past.
Yes, I am a racist, and why? Who's made me a racist? This government, the Conservatives, and every sturdy, stinking councillor who sticks up for the nigger, and I am a racist. Now put that on your television, and I'll stand by my words, because I don't like these people, never will do.
People were getting, fireworks put through the letterbox, people pissing in their dustbins, people intimidating them wherever they went. And we're not talking about a gentle little disagreement. We're talking about a very dangerous right-wing trend.
My mum and dad had a shop in South London, and, behind the shop windows we were sort of barricaded in. But any time that door opened, someone could have come in and hurled abuse at my mum and dad and taken whatever they wanted and run out, because it seemed like there was a sense of sort of lawlessness almost with a particular type of young British person, And in fact, there were times when people came in, helped themselves to things, and saw my mum standing there behind the counter, and they would sort of call her a packy and shout at her and stuff, and then just walk out carrying their stuff.
In the mid-70s, we were all the young people were getting, if you looked a little different, everyone was getting stick from the coppers. But we had it double bad, because then, you had this kind of fascist thing that was on the rise. I remember the KBW graffiti on the walls, Keep Britain White. I remember one time I'm walking through the West End with Jeanette Lee, and I hear in the distance, Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil. I'm like, what year is this? All of a sudden there's 50 right-wing skinheads walking towards me. I sidestep into a record shop, tell Jeanette to take cover. They're looking at me, I'm looking at them. I'm a dead man. All of a sudden, paddy wagon pulls up, 50 cops jump out and bust them all. I'd never been so glad to see coppers in my life.
Although we were aware that there were dangerous people with extreme political views wandering the streets, I think it was the other side of it that actually scared the shit out of me. It was when it became respectable, when there was a local election and 4 manifestos dropped through our letterbox. There was Labour, Liberal, Conservative and National Front.
Power in the darkness, fighting in lies from the other side. Power in the darkness, stand up and fight for your rights. Freedom, all we're talking about is freedom. Just a little bit of freedom to choose what to do with your body. Freedom to believe what you like. Freedom for brothers to love one another. Freedom for black and white. Freedom from elitist male domination. Freedom for the mother and wife. Freedom for big brothers interrogation. Freedom to live your own life.
We're not just interested in the fight against the National Front, we're interested in the fight against racism in British society. The all-round family British racism, you know what I mean?
Is that the Race Relations Board? I wish to make a complaint. Pardon? Am I coloured? Yes, white, all over. I'm proud of it. I wish to make a complaint against the Nignock. Oh, very well, a coloured gentleman then. What's he done? He's moved next door, that's what he's done.
If you look at the old footage, the old archive footage of what the country looked like in that period, you'd probably be very shocked. I think a lot of people don't really realise how bad things were. You know, of course we're dealing with a situation of real political conflict. This is a crisis. It's a real deep crisis, and it's a crisis that's economic, it's a crisis that's political, it's a crisis, you know, I suppose the language now would be a crisis of social cohesion. And much of the language through which that crisis becomes intelligible to people, they become conscious of it through this idea of race and immigration.
In 1968, the year after the Front was formed, events played into their hands. Immigration became a national issue. Enoch Powell made the first of his many speeches warning of racial war in Britain. He said, "As I look ahead, I'm filled with foreboding. Like the Roman, I seem to see the river Tiber foaming with much blood." Powell's speech had an immediate impact. But in London's Dockland, the speech had found a sympathetic audience. East End dockers went on the march to support Powell. For the Front, the march was confirmation that opposing immigration could be a vote winner among sections of the white working class, particularly in areas where immigration was seen as a threat.
And what would you do in the next few years? What are you hoping to see achieved by other means if it is not by your own
I
power?
hope to achieve through the ballot box by getting people elected, first of all, an immediate halt to coloured immigration, and thereafter the phased repatriation of all coloured immigrants, their descendants and dependents from Britain to their lands of ethnic origin.
And if they don't go?
They're going to go.
In this country, in 15 or 20 years' time, the black man will have the whip hand over the white.
Clapton had said something quite extraordinary, most extraordinary of course because we all know of Eric Clapton as the great blues guitarist, the god hero of blues guitar, you know, the music that came out of slavery, and here he is supporting the man, Enoch Powell, who's the greatest supporter of white supremacy in Britain at that time.
Everybody was very shocked that Eric Clapton could have said something as obscene as that. It's obscene coming from anybody's lips, let alone somebody who's made their entire career of living from appropriating African-American culture.
At a concert at Birmingham, he'd made some incredibly inflammatory remark, which was that a foreigner has pinched his missus's bum. And then he went off into some insane diatribe where he said that he thought Enoch Powell was right and that Enoch Powell was the only man for the job, and etc., etc. A well-known Caribbean writer, Carl Phillips, was at that concert.
It wasn't unusual to be the only black kid
in the audience. I mean, that was pretty much how it was when I went to see gigs. But when he started talking about Enoch Powell and how Enoch was right, I felt embarrassed, and I could tell that my best friend felt embarrassed, and we couldn't really talk about it. But the thing that made it really awful, aside from the actual racism of the comments, and aside from the hostility that he was giving out, and the venom from the stage, was that he would play a couple of songs, and I'd think, oh, thank God it's gone away now, it's not going to come back, we've dealt with it. And then he would start up again.
And it was absurd, especially after he'd just had such a big hit out of Bob Marley's I Shot the Sheriff, that he should make racist comments from the stage and in the press.
Possibly the worst moment was the ride home on the bus, in the top deck of the bus with my friend, because we couldn't really talk about it. It was something had come between our friendship, and actually the friendship never recovered, to tell you the truth. We didn't have the vocabulary as two 17, 18-year-old kids to actually put into context what had just happened. It was too shocking. It was a betrayal in a way that is kind of primal, a way that only an adolescent, a late adolescent, could feel it. And I went home, and I never spoke about it to my brothers. I never spoke about it to my parents. It never came up at school the next day. I never wanted to listen to Eric Clapton again.
We were talking about it at rehearsal. We said, we used to get the music press, and we said, what the fuck? Nobody could believe it. And so at the end of one rehearsal one night, I said, I'm going to just get a letter together. About 2 weeks later, it was published.
When we read about Eric Clapton's Birmingham concert, where he urged support for Enoch Powell, we nearly puked. Come on, Eric, you've been taking too much of that Daily Express stuff, and you know you can't handle it. Own up, half your music is black, you're rock's biggest colonialist. You're a good musician, but where would you be without the blues and R&B? You've got to fight the racist poison, otherwise you degenerate into the sewer with the rats and all the money men who ripped off rock culture with their checkbooks and plastic crap. We want to organise a rank and file movement against the racist poison in music. We urge support for Rock Against Racism. P.S.
Who shot the sheriff, Eric? He sure as hell wasn't you.
When I saw the letter in Melody Maker, it just set me alight. That was the turning point. It was such a well-crafted letter, and it just articulated everything that we were feeling. Not just me, hundreds of us, thousands of us were going, yes, this is not right. And when it said Rock Against Racism at the bottom, we just all went, where can we join? What is it?